A wealthy single father observes a waitress caring for his disabled daughter, leading to a life-altering moment for her. The bell chimed gently as Gavin Carter entered the cozy diner, where the inviting aroma of freshly baked bread and brewed coffee enveloped him. It wasn't a venue he typically visited, distant from the upscale eateries where corporate agreements were finalized amidst fine wine and artfully arranged dishes. However, this evening was not focused on work. This evening, the focus was on her, Lily. Beside him, his 6-year-old daughter occupied her wheelchair, her petite figure enveloped in a soft pink coat. Her head hung slightly, and her fingers danced nervously against the fabric of her dress. She remained silent, her gaze fixed ahead, unlike the other children who were curious and observant. She existed in that moment. Gavin felt a tightness in his chest. The hostess, a young woman with weary eyes, managed to smile as she picked up 2 menus. A table for 2, perhaps? Something quiet, Gavin stated, his tone steady yet resolute. The hostess guided them to a booth tucked away at the back, sheltered from the clamor of the dinner rush. As Gavin took his place in the seat opposite Lily, he reached for the menu, though his eyes barely lingered on its contents. He focused intently on his daughter. "Lily," he inquired softly, "are you feeling hungry?" She remained silent. She simply didn't. Gavin let out a slow breath. He loathed this sensation, this powerlessness that gripped his heart each time he attempted to reach out to her. He devoted years to constructing a vast empire, navigating tough choices, and brokering deals valued in the millions. Yet here, facing his own child, he felt completely helpless. A server glided over to their table, a petite notepad poised in hand. "Good evening, my name is Vanessa, and I'll be your server tonight." Gavin looked up. She was in her mid-20s, perhaps. Her hazel eyes radiated a warmth that contrasted sharply with the fatigue he often saw in those who worked in service. She wore a delicate sprinkle of flour on her sleeve, suggesting she had just stepped away from the kitchen. "How may I assist you today?" she inquired, her voice airy and modest. Gavin took a moment to clear his throat. "I'll have grilled chicken, and for my daughter, perhaps something soft like soup." Vanessa's eyes darted toward Lily, a subtle crease forming on her forehead. "Is she all right with chicken noodle? It's crafted from scratch." Gavin paused for a moment, then gave a slight nod. "That works for me." "Wonderful, I'll return shortly." As Vanessa departed, Gavin grabbed his phone, aimlessly scrolling through emails, yet his thoughts wandered far beyond the screen. Will Lily have something to eat this evening? Would she reject the spoon as she typically does? Moments later, Vanessa came back, setting the bowl of soup down in front of Lily and placing the grilled chicken in front of Gavin. "Just let me know if you require anything further," she remarked before moving on. With a heavy sigh, Gavin reached for the spoon. "All right, my dear, let's give it a go, shall we?" He carefully lifted a spoonful of soup, guiding it toward Lily's lips, but just as it approached, her hand shot up, sending it tumbling away. The metal clanged against the plate, splatters of broth marking the pristine white tablecloth. A handful of patrons glanced over. Gavin gritted his teeth, a wave of frustration constricting his chest, directed not at her, but at his own shortcomings. He extended his hand toward the spoon once more, his tone gentler this time. "Lily, I implore you." No response. She remained still, her delicate fingers clutching the edge of her dress, immersed in a realm beyond his grasp. Gavin let out a sharp breath, his hand moving to rub over his face. He concentrated so intently on maintaining his composure that he nearly overlooked the moment someone approached him. "Is it all right if I—" "Vanessa." She knelt beside Lily, her face a mask of inscrutability. Gavin scowled. "Excuse me? Could I give it a go?" she inquired once more, gesturing toward the spoon with a nod. Gavin paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. Typically, he would decline. Lily was far from being a charity case. He had enlisted the finest caregivers, therapists, and specialists available, yet none had managed to reach her. However, there was something in Vanessa's expression, gentle yet resolute, that caused him to hesitate. Without a word, he offered her the spoon. Vanessa adjusted her position to meet Lily's gaze directly. She hesitated before bringing the spoon to the little girl's lips. Instead, she spoke in a gentle, inviting manner. "Hi, Lily," she said, her voice warm and familiar, as though she were greeting a long-lost companion. Lily remained silent, yet Vanessa stood her ground unwaveringly. "You know," Vanessa continued, as she dipped the spoon into the soup, "in my childhood, my mother often shared that soup feels like a cozy embrace for your belly." She raised the spoon gently, yet refrained from applying pressure. "How about sharing a warm embrace?" Gavin observed, astonished. He had never witnessed anyone address Lily in such a manner, as if she were truly engaged, as if she comprehended. For a brief instant, silence reigned, and then Lily's fingers stirred, causing Gavin to hold his breath. Vanessa beamed. "Just a tiny taste, darling." With deliberate care, she lifted the spoon to Lily's lips, and this time, there was no retreat. The comforting broth met her lips, and moments later, she let it slide down her throat. Gavin gazed intently. It was merely a sip, just one sip, yet for a girl who only accepted food under duress, it meant the world. Then an even more astonishing event unfolded. Lily gazed at Vanessa, truly seeing her, and then a smile spread across her face. Gavin sensed the world shift beneath him. Lily had not experienced a smile in years, ever since the passing of her mother. He found himself at a loss, uncertain of how to navigate this fleeting moment. The diner, the other patrons, the murmur of chatter, everything faded away. Only Lily remained, alongside this woman who had, in some inexplicable manner, connected with her like no one else ever could. His voice emerged with a raspy quality. "What was your approach to achieving that?" Vanessa gazed up at him, her hazel eyes radiating warmth yet harboring an enigmatic depth, an emotion that eluded understanding. "I just had a conversation with her, and she said it so effortlessly, as if it were the most natural thing imaginable." Gavin found himself at a loss for words. He remained seated, fixated on the woman who had just dismantled all his beliefs about his daughter, and for the first time in what felt like ages, Gavin Carter sensed a flicker of emotion rise within him. Expectation. Gavin found himself unable to drift into slumber that night. Long after he had taken Lily home, tucked her into bed, and retreated to his study, the vision of Vanessa kneeling beside his daughter lingered in his mind. The manner in which she addressed Lily, the response from Lily, and that smile. Lily had not offered a smile to anyone, not since the passing of his wife. Gavin sat at his desk, his gaze fixed vacantly on the whiskey cradled in his hand. He had engaged experts, counselors, and support staff, but none had connected with her the way Vanessa did. A server in a quaint eatery. Who was she, really? He picked up his phone, pausing momentarily before dialing his assistant. "Discover all there is to know about a woman named Vanessa Lane," he instructed. The following evening, Gavin made his way back to the diner. The atmosphere was more subdued than the previous evening, as the flurry of the dinner crowd had subsided. He noticed Vanessa tidying a table at the rear, her sleeves pushed up, a dusting of flour adorning her cheek. She glided through her tasks with a practiced ease, as if this was second nature to her. Gavin approached her directly. She glanced upward, taken aback as he drew near. "Excuse me, Mr. Carter?" "Vanessa," he remarked, his tone impossible to decipher. "It's time for a conversation." She brushed her hands against her apron, casting a quick look at the other patrons. "I am currently engaged in my tasks. This will be quick." Vanessa took a deep breath and gestured for him to come along as she led him toward the service station, seeking refuge from the watchful gaze of onlookers. Gavin was efficient with his time. "Your performance with Lily last night was truly remarkable." Vanessa blinked, her surprise evident. She simply shrugged. "I simply approached her as if she were a child, rather than a patient." "Precisely." A heavy silence lingered in the air between them. Gavin observed her intently, probing for a hint, a pause, an unspoken response she held back. "You've had experience with children like her in the past, right?" he inquired. Vanessa tensed up. She shook her head. I simply used to look after kids, that's it. Gavin squinted, his gaze sharp and focused. You are not being truthful. Vanessa's lips formed a firm, unyielding line. Listen, I'm not sure what you're suggesting, but I've done some research. Gavin interjected, his tone steady yet assertive. You pursued a degree in special education at NYU. You excelled among your peers. Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. Then, 2 years back, you made the decision to leave. Gavin pressed on, his gaze fixed intently on her. There's no clarification, no trace of your whereabouts following that moment. And now you find yourself serving tables. Vanessa's hands balled into tight fists at her sides. I don't see how that's any of your business, she said softly. Gavin inclined his body ever so slightly. It feels as though you are the sole individual capable of bringing joy to my daughter's face. Vanessa recoiled, almost imperceptibly. Yet Gavin noticed it. In that brief silence, words eluded them both. Then Gavin let out a deep sigh. Join my team. Vanessa's gaze shot upward. Excuse me? Gavin instructed to take on the role of Lily's caregiver. She has faith in you. She replies to you. His voice took on a gentler quality. She requires your presence. Vanessa gazed at him, her face a mask of mystery. Then she laughed, yet the sound held no trace of amusement. You don't even know me, she said, shaking her head. So, you believe bringing me on board is a wise choice. I've got it covered, Gavin replied. I recognize your intelligence and your patience, and I understand that your decision to move on from your past was not due to a lack of skill or capability. Vanessa took a deep breath, averting her gaze. For the first time, Gavin noticed a spark in her gaze. Agony, profound and unexpressed. I can't, she whispered. Gavin scowled. Is that you, Vanessa? I can't, she reiterated, her tone more resolute this time. Thank you for the offer, but I believe there has been a misunderstanding about my identity. Gavin remained quiet for an extended period. Explain it to me, he finally said. Vanessa paused, her throat constricting as if she were trying to suppress a weighty emotion. She shook her head in response. I need to clear the tables. In an instant, she pivoted and strode off into the distance. Gavin observed her departure, his jaw clenching in response. Whatever had driven Vanessa Lane to abandon the path she was destined for, it continued to linger in her mind. For the first time in years, a spark of curiosity ignited within Gavin, compelling him to seek answers. Gavin Carter was not the type to easily release his grip on matters. When something seemed unclear, he sought to uncover the truth. Upon receiving a negative response, he discovered the underlying reason. What about Vanessa Lane? She was an enigma he couldn't overlook. Following their recent exchange, he found himself unable to shake the image of the expression in her eyes, the manner in which she had recoiled, the subtle crack in her voice just before she turned to leave. She was more than just a waitress with a knack for connecting with children. She fled from an unseen threat, and Gavin was determined to uncover the truth behind her escape. It was a brief moment. Utilizing his resources, uncovering Vanessa's history proved to be a straightforward task. She was an exceptional student at NYU, focusing on special education and therapy. In the eyes of her professors, she was a remarkable blend of intelligence and empathy, standing out as one of the most exceptional students they had ever encountered. Then, 2 years ago, she disappeared without a trace. No degree, no ceremony, simply vanished. Gavin's brow furrowed while he perused the reports. What could lead a person to step away from an area where they truly shine? At that moment, he discovered the solution. A brief remembrance. A young boy's face, full of light, beaming with joy. Caleb Lane, 10 years old. Gavin felt a sinking sensation in his stomach. The obituary was succinct, lacking in details, merely stating that the boy had died unexpectedly. Yet it conveyed all that was needed. Vanessa Lane didn't merely study special education. She experienced it deeply, and she had endured a profound loss. That evening, Gavin returned to the diner. He stood apart from the table, refraining from placing an order, simply biding his time. As Vanessa caught sight of him lingering by the entrance, a heavy sigh escaped her lips, and she instinctively ran a hand over her face. "Welcome back, Mr. Carter. We need to talk," Gavin stated, his tone brooking no dissent. Vanessa folded her arms across her chest. "I was under the impression that we had already completed that. This isn't the focus." There was a quality in his tone that caused her to pause. Gavin gestured toward the door. "Shall we step outside?" Vanessa's lips formed a firm line, yet after a brief pause, she loosened her apron and trailed after him. The night air held a refreshing chill, the street serene save for the sporadic sound of a car gliding by. Gavin pivoted to meet her gaze. "I am aware of Caleb." Vanessa stood still, caught in the moment. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a fleeting moment, she appeared as though she had been struck in the gut. Gavin felt a constriction in his chest, yet he pressed on undeterred. "I understand he was your brother, I recognize he had cerebral palsy, and I realize he—" "Don't," Vanessa whispered, her voice a mere breath. Gavin's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you share that with me?" Vanessa emitted a tremulous chuckle, yet it held no trace of amusement. "It's simply not something you need to concern yourself with, that's all." Gavin moved in a fraction closer. "You turned your back on a path you were destined to follow, and I must understand the reason behind it. So you have the ability to mend me? Present me with yet another position I have no interest in?" Gavin stood his ground. "I must understand, as you are the only one who has ever connected with my daughter. If you choose not to assist her, I believe I deserve an explanation." Vanessa shook her head, encircling herself with her arms as if she were cradling a secret within. "Caleb was my everything," she finally uttered, her voice empty. "My parents were often absent, leaving just the two of us together. I dedicated my entire existence to understanding how to nurture him. I assured him that I would always stand by his side, that regardless of the circumstances, I would support him in his journey to recovery." She inhaled unsteadily. "Yet I found myself unable to do so." The words shattered like fragile glass. Gavin felt a constriction in his chest. Vanessa released a harsh chuckle. On a particular night, he fell ill. Started off as nothing significant, merely a fever. However, it deteriorated further and then even more. By the time we arrived at the hospital, her voice trembled. The moment had passed. Gavin took a deep breath. Vanessa furiously brushed away the tears from her eyes. "I dedicated my studies to assist children like him. I should have known what steps to take. However, I chose not to. I let him down." She gazed at Gavin then, her eyes aflame. "I will not falter this time." Gavin gazed at her, his heart racing. This was the reason she had declined his proposal. Not due to a lack of concern, but rather from an overwhelming sense of care. Having lost one child had shattered her, and she was filled with dread at the thought of forming a bond with another. Vanessa shook her head, retreating slightly. "Now you are informed." "Content?" Gavin remained silent. For the very first time, he found himself at a loss for words. Vanessa found herself unexpectedly agreeing. When Gavin extended the proposal once more, just for a week, he urged, "Give it a shot for just 1 week." She was fully resolved to decline. Yet there was an element in his tone, a subtle urgency lurking beneath his typically composed exterior, that caused her to pause. And then came Lily. Vanessa could still picture the gentle smile of the little girl from that evening at the diner. How her gaze had locked onto her. Her reaction to a mere act of kindness was remarkable. Vanessa hadn't experienced the feeling of competence in what felt like an eternity, because she had sensed her importance. Despite every instinct urging her to turn back, she declared, 1 week, that's it. The Carter estate was a far cry from her expectations. It wasn't merely a house. It was a grand mansion, a contemporary stronghold concealed behind wrought iron gates and meticulously tended gardens. Vanessa stepped in behind Gavin, her fingers gripping the strap of her bag as she absorbed the grandeur of the towering ceilings, the polished marble floors, and the expansive open areas that seemed overwhelmingly vast and desolate. "Text," Gavin said this as he guided her down the hallway. They paused before a door that stood slightly open. The chamber of Lily. Vanessa entered and instantly sensed a tightness in her throat. It was truly stunning. Gentle hues of pastel, books and plush toys adorning the shelves. A grand window reaching to the ceiling, inviting in the warm glow of the afternoon sun. At the heart of it all, nestled in her wheelchair, was Lily. She remained focused, her gaze fixed ahead as they stepped inside. Gavin let out a breath, his hand moving to massage the back of his neck. Has been more subdued than normal since her mother passed. Vanessa cast a fleeting look in his direction. His expression was a mystery, yet the tightness in his jaw revealed all she needed to know. He held himself accountable. She glanced back at Lily, fully aware of that sensation. The initial couple of days proved to be quite challenging. Lily hardly recognized that Vanessa was there at all. She recoiled as Vanessa attempted to direct her hand toward a toy, averting her gaze when addressed. Vanessa sensed the uncertainty settling in. What if I can no longer continue with this? What if I let her down like I let Caleb down? However, on the third day a shift occurred. Vanessa read with a gentle cadence, her voice flowing softly, though it appeared that Lily was lost in her own thoughts, not truly engaged. Just as she was on the verge of closing the book, something caught her eye. Lily's fingers danced across the surface. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it flowed seamlessly with Vanessa's words. Vanessa's breath hitched. This story resonates with you, doesn't it? She inquired softly. No reply, yet the tapping persisted. And in that moment, Vanessa experienced a flicker of hope. That evening, Vanessa settled next to Lily's bed, gently arranging the blankets. Lily's eyelids fluttered gently, her breath steady and calm. Vanessa paused briefly. Then, in a voice that barely rose above a whisper, she started to sing. You are the light in my life, my one and only light. Lily shifted a bit, yet she remained close. Your presence brings joy even on the cloudiest days. Vanessa felt a constriction in her throat. This was the very lullaby she once sang to Caleb, the one he always requested, even during his toughest moments. She had not performed it since his passing. She had vowed to herself that she never would. Yet, as she observed Lily's tiny fingers grasping the edge of the blanket, she found herself unable to hold back. In the corridor, Gavin remained motionless, caught in a moment of stillness. As he strolled by, the sound of Vanessa's voice caught his attention. He anticipated pushback from Lily. He anticipated that this experiment, this single week, would yield no results. Yet, in that moment, as he stood there absorbing the gentle, sorrowful melody, he perceived something that had eluded him for months. Lily lay in a deep slumber. Serenely, there was no tossing, no whimpering, no haunted dreams that left her gasping for breath. Gavin clenched his jaw, his fingers tightening around the doorframe. For the first time since the passing of his wife, his daughter found a sense of tranquility. And it wasn't due to him. She was the reason. Gavin Carter dedicated years to constructing a formidable empire. He had finalized agreements valued in the millions, engaged with some of the most formidable entrepreneurs globally, and transformed struggling enterprises into thriving giants. Yet, nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever felt as fulfilling as witnessing his daughter take her initial steps toward placing her trust in someone once more. It all stemmed from Vanessa. Initially, the alterations were minor. Gavin often found himself fading into the shadows while Vanessa collaborated with Lily. He reassured himself that he was merely a spectator, ensuring that this endeavor held value. However, he began to participate as well. Initially, it was minor details, assisting Lily in stacking blocks, guiding her hand through exercises, and sitting alongside her while Vanessa shared stories. Before he knew it, he found himself there each day. One afternoon, while Vanessa led Lily through a straightforward stretching routine, she looked up and noticed Gavin observing them. Not merely observing, but truly observing. His expression held a certain depth. Something gentle, delicate. You really don't need to be here, Vanessa whispered softly. Gavin maintained his gaze on Lily, who clutched his fingers firmly as she sought to find her balance. Indeed, Vanessa frowned. What is the reason? Gavin breathed out slowly, his eyes fixed intently on his daughter. I ought to have arrived here much earlier. A weight settled in Vanessa's chest. She had thought of Gavin as merely another affluent entrepreneur, preoccupied with his own affairs to care for his child. Yet now, as she gazed at him, truly gazing at him, the reality became clear. His absence didn't stem from a lack of concern. He was missing, lost in a way that seemed beyond his control. As Gavin spent more time with them, Vanessa increasingly observed the shifts in his demeanor. He chuckled more often. Not the courteous, measured chuckle she had encountered previously, but a genuine laugh, rich and unrestrained. He discovered the art of calming Lily during her moments of frustration. He discovered the art of being fully engaged in the moment. What about Vanessa? Vanessa experienced an emotion that had eluded her for years. Objective. She had devoted so much time to persuading herself that this path was no longer hers, that any attempt to return would only lead to failure. Yet with Lily it felt effortless. It resonated with a sense of belonging. As the sun gracefully descended beyond the horizon, Vanessa and Gavin found themselves on the back patio, reflecting on a particularly rewarding session from earlier that evening. Lily had drifted off to sleep indoors, weary yet content. Vanessa took a delicate sip of her tea, relishing the comforting warmth that enveloped her. Her progress is remarkable. Gavin nodded, his eyes lost in thought. Vanessa shook her head. All because of you. Due to her own actions. I'm simply guiding her to recognize her own potential. Gavin faced her, his blue eyes filled with intensity. It seems like you extend that courtesy to all. Am I right? Vanessa's eyes fluttered open. Excuse me? You inspire individuals to realize their potential and achieve what once seemed unattainable. His voice was soft, yet there was an undercurrent that hinted at something more. Something Vanessa was not prepared to label. She averted her gaze. I once believed that. Gavin observed her intently for an extended period. Then, almost too softly, he murmured, "You still do." Vanessa felt her heart racing. For the first time since their paths had crossed, she perceived Gavin Carter not as a billionaire, not as an aloof father, but as a man. And that filled her with dread. It unfolded in an instant. In that fleeting instant, they remained seated, the atmosphere heavy with the weight of unvoiced thoughts. Then, Gavin extended his hand towards hers. She remained close. His fingers glided over the back of hers, a gentle caress, exploring cautiously. Vanessa, he whispered. She raised her gaze. And then he pressed his lips against hers. It lacked urgency or any pressing demands. He moved with deliberate slowness, as if allowing her the opportunity to intervene. Yet she chose not to. In a fleeting, cherished instant, she allowed herself to truly experience her emotions. The gentle warmth of his lips, the tender way his hand cradled her cheek, the rhythmic pulse of his heart beneath her palm. And then, the truth came crashing down. Vanessa recoiled, her breath faltering. Gavin's brows knitted together. Is that you, Vanessa? I can't, she whispered, rising suddenly. Gavin extended his hand toward her, yet she retreated a step. Apologies, she faltered, her head shaking in denial. I ought not to have. This was an error. His demeanor grew somber. An error. Vanessa took a deep breath. This is beyond my capabilities, Gavin. He rose, irritation dancing in his eyes. What's stopping us? Because I can't, her voice faltered. She inhaled deeply, her fingers tightening around the railing behind her. I cannot bear the thought of losing someone else who means so much to me. Gavin's demeanor became gentler. Is that you, Vanessa? Yet she was already pivoting, withdrawing into the depths, leaving Gavin there, his heart racing. For the first time in years, he became acutely aware of his deep desire to escape the solitude that had enveloped him. Vanessa had dedicated years to constructing barriers around her heart, persuading herself that keeping a safe distance was the wisest choice, that investing emotions only resulted in heartache. Yet, in a way that caught her off guard, Gavin and Lily had quietly faded into the background, and that unsettled her more than anything else. The following morning, she arrived at her decision. She entered Gavin's office, her heart pounding in her chest, hands clenched into tight fists at her sides. He lifted his gaze from the cluttered surface of his desk, a look of astonishment crossing his features. "Vanessa," she gulped nervously. "I've decided to step away." The words were sharp and painful, yet she pushed them through with determination. Gavin's demeanor shifted to one of shadow and intensity. He reclined in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "Could you repeat that?" Vanessa maintained a calm and composed tone. "I can't continue with this any longer." Gavin's jaw tightened. "What is the reason behind this?" "Due to my deep concern. Due to my overwhelming fear. Because I'm unsure of how to let you go." Yet, she found herself unable to express that thought. Instead, she offered a slight shrug. It was perpetually fleeting. "I never intended to remain indefinitely." Gavin's eyes sparkled with an enigmatic intensity. "Is that all? Are you really just going to walk away?" Vanessa acknowledged with a nod, despite the painful twist in her stomach. Gavin let out a sharp breath, shaking his head in disbelief. "What about Lily?" Vanessa recoiled. "She will be all right." "She will not." His voice carried a low, taut intensity. "You're aware she won't." Vanessa bit her lip, her gaze drifting elsewhere. She found it impossible to dwell on thoughts of Lily, regarding how she began to extend her hand, embracing trust once more. The way her delicate fingers had grasped at Vanessa's sleeve just the night before. If she allowed herself to ponder it, she would shatter. Summoning her resolve, she locked eyes with Gavin and uttered the harshest words she could muster. "You can manage just fine without me, Gavin." His expression grew steely. "You only believe you do," she went on, dismissing the urgent pleas of her heart urging her to cease. "However, I was never intended to be a lasting answer. You're simply seeking someone to—" She paused for a moment, then struck with decisive force. "To find a substitute for your spouse." The stillness that ensued was overwhelming. Gavin's whole being tightened, his fingers clutching the rim of his desk. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an unsettling calmness. "Leave now." Vanessa felt a searing pain in her throat. "Gavin, please leave." Vanessa turned and walked away, each step tearing at her insides. Lily ceased to eat 3 days following Vanessa's departure. She ceased her play, withdrew her responses, and let her smile fade away. Gavin made an effort. He truly made an effort. He shared meals with her, delved into her beloved stories, and engaged in the games that Vanessa had introduced to them. Yet it was never quite the same. Lily's gaze was different when it came to him compared to how she had regarded Vanessa. She didn't shine as brightly as she did when Vanessa was around. Gavin despised it, loathed the feeling of inadequacy. It was infuriating that Vanessa had turned her back as if their connection held no significance. Yet above all, he loathed the depth of his longing for her. Gavin Carter had always been a person guided by reason. He constructed his empire through precise, strategic choices, always ensuring that feelings did not interfere with his reasoning. Yet at this moment, reason alone fell short. No amount of reasoning could mend the void that Vanessa created. Moreover, he was not alone in his suffering. Lily was fading into the distance. Initially, it was understated. She turned down her beloved dishes. She averted her gaze as Gavin offered assistance with mundane chores. She ceased to extend her hand towards him. One night, he strolled by her room and discovered her huddled in a ball, quietly weeping into her pillow. Something within him broke apart. Gavin settled next to her, a heaviness in his chest. "Lily." There was no reply from her. He leaned in, gently tucking her hair behind her ear. "Engage with me, darling." Lily let out a soft sniffle. Then, in a voice so soft it nearly shattered him, she murmured, "Where's Vanessa?" Gavin shut his eyes. For weeks, he convinced himself that he had the power to mend this situation. If he put in enough effort, Lily would eventually let go. However, he was mistaken. Vanessa was far more than a fleeting presence in their lives. She was kin. Gavin had been oblivious, obstinate, and fearful, unable to acknowledge the depth of her significance in their lives. However, that is no longer the case. The diner buzzed with activity as Gavin stepped inside. Yet, he remained indifferent. His presence was solely for her, not for the customers, not for the food, not for anything else. For once, he had company. Lily nestled in his embrace, her delicate fingers clutching his coat, her complexion wan from weeks of sorrow. Vanessa stood at the counter, her pen dancing across the notepad as she captured her thoughts. She appeared weary, more slender than in the past, her hair hastily pulled back. Yet, as she lifted her gaze and caught sight of them, she became motionless. For an extended pause, everyone remained still. Then, Vanessa's gaze fell upon Lily, and her breath caught in her throat. In an instant, she was at the counter, kneeling beside them, her hands quivering as she extended them toward the little girl. Lily. Her voice trembled. "Oh, darling." Lily raised her gaze, looking at Vanessa as if she were uncertain of her existence. With great effort and a sense of lingering sorrow, she raised her hand and gently brushed Vanessa's cheek. As soon as Vanessa sensed that slight, comforting warmth, everything came crashing down. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she embraced Lily, clutching her tightly as if to never release her. Gavin observed, his throat constricted. In a hushed tone, he finally uttered the words that had lingered unspoken for weeks. "Your presence is essential to me, Vanessa." Vanessa paused. She embraced Lily more firmly, gazing up at him, her hazel eyes glistening with unfallen tears. Gavin moved in a bit closer. "I don't only need you for Lily," he went on, his voice raw and unguarded. "Your presence is essential for my own well-being." Vanessa's breath caught in her throat. "Gavin," he confessed, "I was frightened. Fear gripped me at the thought of allowing you into my world, of the implications it would carry. Yet here I am," he breathed out unsteadily. "Your presence is essential for me to move forward." Vanessa's lips parted, yet silence enveloped her, as she yearned to trust him. Oh, how she longed to trust him. Yet, fear still gripped her tightly. Lily's delicate fingers wrapped around the spoon, quivering just a bit as she brought it closer to her lips. The dining room lay in quiet stillness. Each breath was a silent battle as she fought to maintain her hold. For the very first time, she took the initiative to nourish herself. One solitary bite, a subtle, tentative gesture. Yet for Gavin and Vanessa it meant the world. Lily's eyes widened in astonishment as she turned her gaze to Vanessa. Vanessa felt a constriction in her throat. "You accomplished it, darling." Gavin exhaled gently, a grin spreading widely on his face. "You truly did." Lily's soft giggle filled the air, a sound Gavin had missed for ages, and in that instant, he understood everything. It transcended merely what Vanessa had accomplished for Lily. It revolved around her actions for him. For the first time since his wife's passing, he felt a newfound courage to embrace love once more. He delved into his pocket, his fingers curling around the small velvet box he had held onto for days. Vanessa faced him, her cheeks glistening with joyful tears. "Excuse me?" Gavin let out a slow breath. In that moment, before she could utter another syllable, he sank to one knee. Vanessa's breath hitched. "Gavin, will you be mine forever?" he whispered gently. Vanessa's hands darted to her mouth. Lily, blissfully ignorant of the significance of the moment, clapped her hands with delight. "Vanessa, please agree." Vanessa released a laugh tinged with emotion, shaking her head in astonishment. "Gavin?" Gavin extended his hand toward hers, his grip confident and unwavering. "I love you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I desire your presence to extend beyond just Lily's life. I desire your presence in my life." Vanessa's eyes brimmed once more, but this time it was not out of fear. It was an entirely different experience, a fresh perspective, a comforting embrace. She exhaled unsteadily, then murmured, "Yes." Gavin gently placed the ring on her finger, then enveloped her in his embrace, holding her close while Lily celebrated joyfully beside them. After a long time, they were no longer merely three shattered souls struggling to get by. They constituted a family. Love transcends the mere act of discovering another person. It's a matter of repeatedly selecting them, Gavin had spent years convinced that love was a treasure he would never reclaim. Vanessa had devoted just as much time to persuading herself that love was a perilous endeavor not worth the gamble again. Ultimately, it transcended fear. The essence of Lily's laughter resonated throughout their home, while Gavin discovered the bravery to embrace love once more, and Vanessa came to understand that she was not fated to lose those she held dear. True love transcends mere attraction. It revolves around the themes of sacrifice, trust, and discovering a sense of belonging in the most surprising of circumstances. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to soul-stirring stories for more touching narratives that highlight the strength of love, resilience, and the beauty of second chances. Sometimes, the connections we create can hold more strength than those we are born into.